Well, I'll say that's 1 foot, that's 2, that's 3.
Ricky Jordan can't measure his backyard for a pool or even a piece of play equipment for his 5-year-old granddaughter.
We'll say about 12, 13 feet.
Because 12.5 feet from his house,
Pretty close for comfort.
he has an intruder, a mile-deep abandoned oil well that spews gas.
And as you can hear it, I'm gonna just do it halfway. And that's gas that's coming out of it.
Jordan bought the house about 10 years ago.
It's something that you wouldn't expect to be in your backyard. For 7, 8 years, it's been sitting here.
His real estate agent and property records disclose nothing about the abandoned oil well from the 1930s.
I'm thinking that back in 1939, when the well wasn't producing anymore, the state of Louisiana just told them to abandon the well. So they just walked away from it without plugging it. And statewide order 29B states that the well should be cut at least 2 feet below plow depth and shouldn't even be on top of the ground level where you can see it.
Records show Harry Fote Oil Company walked away from the well at Jordan's home in Shreveport. Initially, Jordan thought the well was an abandoned sewage line. Once he discovered the well, the backyard has become off limits to his grandchildren.
Can they even play in the backyard around this?
No, they cannot. We keep them in the house all the time because it's not safe.
The state of Louisiana has close to 4,000 of these abandoned oil wells around the state. They are everywhere, on the water, in backyards, in fields around Shreveport, Lake Charles, Baton Rouge, and New Orleans.
Did you make any money off the wells?
A little bit.
Seeger's operating company in Monroe has the 4th most abandoned wells, 66.
Do you feel bad for leaving an unplugged well?
No.
Why not?
I just don't. I mean, you can't, you can't, if you don't have the clout to go out and borrow money to go bankrupt to do it, there's no sense in doing it.
Derek Seeger's company should have plugged all 66 wells. Instead, he walked away and left it up to the state to pay the cost to plug and clean up.
It's about $6,000 a piece to plug, and they're stripper production. I didn't drill them in the first place. You know what I mean?
You got them from someone else.
Yes. And, you never will make enough money off of them to plug them,
So going in, you're not plugging it.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you think that's right, though?
No, but it happens everywhere.
The state has a fund that pays for plugging abandoned wells. That fund is replenished by a quarterly fee on oil and gas operators.
How much did you pay into the oil field restoration fund?
It was in the pennies. It's a fractional tax.
So like for each well, how much about?
Put it this way, it might have been like $5 or $7 a month total.
So you paid, what, a couple $100s into the oil field restoration fund?
It probably wasn't even that over the years because
that's it.
Yeah, but it's based on your MCL.
See, I mean, there's no way that's going to plug the.
No.
Last year, the state plugged 43 wells, but they can't get ahead of this potential environmental hazard. That's because in the same year, they declared at least 583 wells abandoned.
I mean, some of these aren't safe. Oh, I'm sure there are some out there that aren't safe, yes.
Yeah. Should the state be doing more?
I think if we had, we do what we can with what we have right now, the money that we have coming in.
The state's Office of Conservation monitors the wells, but the office has little teeth to go after these operators. State law doesn't allow the office to sue a company unless cleanup and plugging expenses top $250,000 per well. Then and only then can they go after the operator for money.
$250,000 and under, they're not responsible.
That's correct.
So you can do nothing to them.
That's correct.
So why, if I'm an operator and I have a well and I know it's probably going to cost $100,000 or $200,000 to plug, why wouldn't I walk away? Right?
I couldn't tell you.
This is an abandoned well just outside of Thibodaux. First, I want you to listen just for 1 second. You can hear that sound of something clearly leaking from that oil well. Then as we zoom in up top, you can see something dripping from up there. And as we widen out and show you the ground right here, you can see it is covered with oil. And we definitely know it's oil because we've been here just for a few minutes. And as we breathe it in, it is strong. It's almost unbearable to stay here for a long time.
Where does all our money go? This should have been dealt with.
Amy Benoit lives a few football fields away. How far away is your house from this oil well?
Probably about 800 foot.
Benoit says the smell can be unbearable and the state has done nothing.
The state don't have any money to deal with these wells. They're orphan wells.
These wells are a potential environmental hazard. So look at this.
Oh, wow.
We took environmental scientist Wilma Subra
Look at that.
to Ricky Jordan's house.
This one is a huge environmental problem.
Subra says no agency has studied the environmental impacts of these abandoned wells.
This is so many wells spread throughout the state in residential areas and commercial areas, and there's not like a sign over every one of these wells, danger.
No one's looking in the environmental impacts of any of this.
As far as doing studies and that type of thing and sending out, no sir, no one's doing any studies on it, no.
TNM Production of Houston, Texas has the most abandoned wells, 330. Drum Energy of Monroe, the second most, 194. That company is still active with the Secretary of State, but they refuse to answer correspondence from the Office of Conservation or a letter we sent last month.
How do you stop people from walking away from wells? You can't.
Gil Murphy used to be a member of High Hope Oil and Gas. He sold his share in the company shortly before High Hope abandoned 41 wells.
I'm not involved in it anymore. So as ugly as this is going to sound, it's not my problem.
From a High Hope perspective, if you're making hundreds of thousands, shouldn't you be responsible to plug it for $5,500?
You were making hundreds of thousands, but the problem is that you take that hundreds of thousands you're making and spend it elsewhere. The smart operator will take the money he makes, set aside for plugging liability. When it comes around, there's the money to do that.
The smart operator.
The smart operator, yeah.
Or the ethical one.
Well, either way.
Murphy says much of this comes down to money. Small operators working on thin profit margins don't have the money or savings to cover the plugging costs, which can range from $4,000 to tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars.
What a lot of these folks have done is just, especially when the price fell, they just can't afford to operate them anymore, so they just walked away.
But some companies still in business still walk away. In 2015, the state spent $587,000 plugging this well, left behind by Tri-Power Resources of Oklahoma. Tri-Power abandoned Louisiana, but still has active wells in Kansas and Texas. The Office of Conservation chose not to go after Tri-Power to recoup money on that well, or a second abandoned well that cost an additional $387,000. Tri-Power owns two of the most expensive wells the state has ever been forced to clean up. The state only has about $4 million a year to plug wells. And with the downturn of the oil industry, Louisianians may see even more abandoned wells popping up around the state.
And they really ought to be ashamed of themselves, because that's environmental, and they should take care of the stuff. When you put something on somebody's property, you should have enough respect to take it off, once you're done with it.
Is that a lack of respect for you?
Oh, that's a lack of respect for everybody around here. Oh, yes, indeed.
Hey, I'm Lee Zurich. How are you? Nice to see you. We're hoping to schedule an on-camera interview with you, actually.
Sure, I'm not interested in doing an on-camera interview.
Why not?
Why? I don't.
Tony Rice's nonprofit gets around $500,000 of your money every year, public money.
Yeah, I've been around.
Pat Lynch has been digging into numbers since Gerald Ford's presidency. He's been a CPA since the 70s and says this reluctance
I'm not interested
raises his antenna.
She won't do an interview with us.
Well, I believe if you have nothing to hide, you hide nothing.
So?
And I'm a fraud investigator, so this gives me a lot of pause.
Tony Rice makes $80,000 a year running the New Orleans Multicultural Tourism Network, a private nonprofit tasked with attracting minority tourists and conventions.
Is this a waste of taxpayer money?
I think it is.
But a thorough review of the nonprofit's records leaves the longtime CPA concerned.
Where is Board of Directors oversight? There is none.
July 2014, records show Rice traveled to Miami for the International Multicultural Conference. There, she used the nonprofit's credit card 4 times at the pool bar, a total of $137. Rice also charged an additional $90 at the hotel's main bar and rented 2 pool lounge chairs.
How do you justify that as a business expense?
Receipts show Rice made that trip with 1 other adult and a 10-year-old child. Before the conference in Miami, she made 2 charges at the Crown Plaza in Orlando. In Orlando, she also charged $511 to IOA ADMI. A quick search in the internet reveals that may be associated with Universal Studios.
So the taxpayers paid for a theme park trip.
That's what it appears to be.
The list of questionable purchases is long.
Dillard's, Michael, Crew to Brew Coffee, Best Buy, Enterprise Rental, Walmart, Rosetta Stone.
Purchases with nothing that shows why taxpayers needed to foot the bill.
Walgreens, Kingfish, Home Depot, Martin Wine Cellar, Second Wine.
We reviewed 3 years of credit card statements, nearly 1,400 purchases. We asked Rice for copies of the backup receipts, but she produced only 57. 4%.
She needs to keep receipts.
Right, and detailed receipts.
In fact, in 2010, the nonprofit's auditor said they needed to start keeping receipts for all credit card purchases, writing there as potential fraudulent activities that would not be detected. Rice told the auditor they would adopt a credit card policy to address those concerns. Here's a copy of that policy. It states all receipts must accompany the employee's expense report. Violations of the agreement could include disciplinary action up to and including termination and potentially criminal prosecution. In 2012, the auditor criticized Rice for charging gas to the nonprofit's credit card, writing, "The Multicultural Tourism Network couldn't determine the portion of gas that is attributed to personal use." On July 10, 2013, Rice responded effective immediately, no employees will be allowed to purchase gas with the credit card, and even attached a mileage reimbursement policy.
So Ms. Rice told the auditor I would no longer charge any gas on the public credit card, yet after she tells the auditor that, she still charges gas on the credit card.
Right.
Remember, she wrote the letter in the summer of 2013 promising no more gas charges on that nonprofit credit card. But the next year, 2014, she charged $2,000 in gas to the nonprofit. In 2015, $600. Dozens of those gas charges at stations in St. Charles Parish, where Rice lives.
No one's done anything about it.
That's correct.
I mean, this is taxpayer money.
That's correct.
Since the 90s, a city council ordinance has dedicated money to the Multicultural Tourism Network every year.
Should the New Orleans City Council be asking more questions about where this money's going?
I would think so.
In a city strapped for cash, every penny counts.
$500,000 certainly would pay for a couple of more police officers, may fix a couple of more potholes, and we're in need of both. So why are we wasting $500,000 every year?
The Multicultural Tourism Network's mission is to identify and promote the culture diversity of New Orleans and to increase local business opportunities at all levels of the hospitality industry.
And certainly from the IRS's perspective, this would not pass muster as documentation.
No document to support purchases of Phantom of the Opera tickets, women's clothing, throw pillows, and in about 3 years, $18,000 of food, much of it with little explanation of the public benefit.
Yeah, but I'm not going to do it on camera.
About how you spend public money?
Right.
You don't think you should be held accountable with how you spend public money?
Absolutely, but I'm
So
not
then
interested
answer some questions for us.
I'd be happy to submit a statement, but I won't do an on-camera interview.
I want you to hear Elvis.
A request you don't hear much following an investigative interview.
Where's Elvis at? Tell him to play something for us.
But after our lengthy questioning of this former public official,
That's a lie.
Who are you calling?
The mayor's full of shit.
we were entertained by the town's award-winning Elvis impersonator. A regular Friday night performer for Michael Ragusa, the former mayor of Independence in Tangipahoa Parish.
You know, I don't need to take anything from anybody.
Ragusa's being accused of giving friends and other businesses favors during his time in office.
You think that's malfeasance in office?
I think it is, yes.
The accusations from the new mayor of the town, who beat him in a heated election.
It's happening all over. Public officials are doing things to benefit themselves instead of benefit their constituents. And I feel like anytime you step over that line where you're trying to benefit yourself, that's not what you're sworn to office to do.
The heart of the accusations start here, Quickway Food Mart in Independence. The store has 2 water meters. For 1 year, the meter going into the store was not billed to the account. The city only billed for the second meter, feeding the sprinkler system. Quickway received free water for about a year.
Probably in the thousands of dollars, maybe $10,000, $15,000 or so.
Of free water.
Free water.
Quickway started receiving that free water in November of 2015. A month later, then Mayor Michael Ragusa's construction company, Brunt Construction, applied for a building permit for another Quickway store in Hammond. So while Quickway received a break on water, Ragusa's company earned money, building another Quickway store owned by Jimmy Ballard.
Didn't have anything to do with it. Nothing. I would not risk my job with Jim. I've been knowing Jimmy since 1971, him and his family.
Is that who owns Quickway?
Yes, Jimmy Ballard. Been on since 1971. And I would not do anything like that. He would not do anything like that.
Tulane law professor Joel Friedman says the relationship raises questions.
This is the kind of thing that got Mayor Nagin in trouble. You know, you make contracts, public contracts with people with whom you have some relationship. It doesn't have to be a familial relationship. It can be a business relationship. It can be an in-kind transfer where I as the mayor give you something advantageous to you, and in exchange you hire my company to build something for me which promotes my own personal business.
According to the new mayor, the brakes on water bills led to a huge hole in the town's budget. Take a look at the monthly water bill for Duran Shrimp Processing. And once Ragusa goes out of office, it shoots up from $446 to some months $17,000. Another example, Lally Kemp Medical Center. It ranges from a few $1,000s down to less than $500. But when Ragusa leaves office, as much as $20,000 a month.
You know, tens of thousands of dollars, all it adds up.
When the current mayor took office, the town only collected money from 650 meters. Now that count is up to 857.
Essentially more than 20% of the water users in Independence were getting free water?
Basically, yes.
The new mayor says water bill collection has increased since he's been in office.
That's a lie.
Records show in January of 2016, the town collected $54,000 in water payments. A year later, after Ragusa left office, collections topped $91,000.
It was causing the town to basically not be able to pay its bills.
So the town was on the verge of bankruptcy because of this?
Yes, it was.
The former mayor says in many cases the town estimated the water usage instead of reading meters.
These were not metered and this is metered.
Why didn't you meter them?
Why didn't I meter them?
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't my responsibility to meter them at that time. We had a lot of problems.
You're the mayor. Whose responsibility is it then?
Well, it don't make any difference.
Each resident that opens a new account has to give the city a $150 deposit. The new administration says they can't account for at least $6,000 of that money.
No receipts of it being deposited in the bank.
So where did it go?
I can't.
Did they pay cash?
They paid cash, yes. Yes.
So the cash disappeared?
Yes.
Well, he ought to trace it.
He says he can't.
Well, I don't know why he can't.
He says it's
Because
nowhere to be found.
Believe me, there's none of that stuff happened.
So you don't think anyone took the cash?
No.
But I mean, they say they can't find it.
Well, if they can't find it, they ain't looking for it.
The former mayor and current mayor know each other well.
His father and my mother were brother and sister.
Yes, they're first cousins.
He's off himself.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, he just brags about everything, you know, and he's one of these guys that when you go hunting, he kills the most rabbits. When you go fishing, he catches the most fish.
There's no hard feelings. I don't have any hard feelings.
Mayor Menino says his problems focus solely on what Ragusa left the city. In office, he says Ragusa failed to pay into the state retirement system for his employees, leaving the town with a nearly $900,000 debt.
The mayor is full of shit. You can tell him I said that.
Ragusa says the mayor before him failed to pay into the system too.
So I said, well, just continue doing what you've been doing. And that's what they did.
But according to the State Retirement Board, that may not be true. Before Ragusa took office, Independence paid retirement for 11 to 13 employees. When Ragusa took office, it declined in 2014 and 15 to 0. But since the new mayor has taken office, the number is back up to 10 to 11.
He just didn't think it was fair.
Fair to who?
To the town of Independence.
To pay for employees' retirement?
Yes.
So he just didn't pay it?
Didn't pay it. The whole 8 years he was in there.
The State Retirement Board sent 10 letters to Ragusa asking him to pay into the system, at one point writing, "The fact that you have chosen to ignore this account is causing a hardship for your employees and costing your town additional money."
I blame the CPA on it.
Michael Ragusa is retired from public office now, but says his cousin is exaggerating. Ragusa spends his time now running that construction company. Surely to the sea. In listening to his favorite performer.
I don't need to take anything from anybody, you know. I don't need that. All I want to do is something good for the town. I don't want to try to steal anything. I'm not a stealing person.
The new mayor wants someone to investigate those allegations and says he's turning around the financial nightmares his predecessor left behind.
Everybody loved Bubba. He had a heart as big as Texas.
Teresa Greenlee Jeffers' brother had a big heart but a weak liver. Days before Christmas in 2015, Ochsner Hospital admitted Bubba Greenlee to their transplant floor. Heavy alcohol use caught up with Bubba.
But I also know that for the last year of his life, he wasn't drinking. He was pulling himself up, he was pulling himself out. He was in a better place.
Doctors told Bubba he needed a transplant or within 2 weeks he'd die. But 5 days after Christmas, Ochsner sent him home.
His last Christmas, he was given false hope that he was going to get a transplant. That's not okay. You don't play with somebody's emotions like that.
According to hospital records, Ochsner denied Bubba a liver transplant because of poor insight and the need to get rehabilitation. They advised him to seek another liver transplant opinion and suggested Tulane or Jackson, Mississippi.
The cirrhosis, okay, he did that to himself. But I'm not happy that his opportunity to get a liver was denied because they didn't want to bother with him for whatever reason.
You think that's what it was?
Why tell him to go someplace else? Why refer him to other places?
It's unclear if Bubba would have ever qualified for a liver, but 17 days after his release, Bubba Greenlee died, killed by cirrhosis at the age of 45.
I don't have anybody left to share and say, remember when we were kids, or remember growing up. They're all gone.
Bubba Greenlee never made it on the waiting list, but in 2015, 1,400 people died while officially waiting for a liver transplant in our country. Not known to Bubba and many others, organs donated in the U.S. are sometimes given to patients flying in from other countries, and many pay a premium.
The hospitals make a lot of money on non-residents who come here for organs.
Foreign patients are not normally entitled to private insurance or Medicare discounts. Federal data from 2015 shows the cash price for a liver transplant at Ochsner was $393,000, but the cost to Medicare patients is much less, just $100,000. Across the U.S., the majority of foreign recipients come from countries in the Middle East, including Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Israel, and the United Arab Emirates.
Doesn't feel good to me. Ideally, each country should have what we like to call self-sufficiency.
The year Ochsner released Bubba, the hospital performed 14 liver transplants on non-U.S. citizens who came to the U.S. for the sole purpose of receiving a new liver. These transplants strictly from deceased donors, and those livers need to stay close to their donation location. They have to be transplanted within about 24 hours of recovery.
There's a sense that, ethically speaking, if you can be a donor, you ought to be able to be a recipient. If you are a recipient, you ought to come from potential donors.
Some medical ethicists agree. A 2016 article in the American Journal of Transplantation said foreigners should be last in line for a transplant. One of the authors says when you take people from other parts of the world and provide an organ transplant to them rather than someone who's here, there's a real cost. There's a real life that's lost.
But if your home is in somewhere else, a long way away, there's no way that you can be a donor, or your family or your friends could be donors. And in some respects, when you then come to the United States, you are using up a valuable resource that is in great shortage here.
Right now, the waiting list for all U.S. hospitals is at 14,500, but each year livers are only available for around 7,000 people. Dr. Gabe Danovich is the medical director of UCLA's transplant program. Danovich chaired the International Committee for UNOS, the United Network for Organ Sharing, which contracts with the federal government to operate the National Organ Donor Network. UNOS tracks all liver donations and transplants.
When you give an organ in the United States to a wealthy individual from another country, not only are you undermining the allocation of organs to United States residents, you are also taking away from the other country the necessity to develop organ donation.
Danovich says a U.S. citizen can't go to Saudi Arabia to receive a transplant. Still, Ochsner appears to recruit Saudi patients. In 2015, the hospital signed a global strategic partnership agreement with a Saudi company to facilitate the procedures and mechanisms of medical tourism. Since 2013, Ochsner has performed 953 liver transplants, 34 of those to non-U.S. citizens, foreign nationals who came to the States for the sole purpose of receiving a liver transplant. That 34 is more than any other hospital in the country, more than Memorial Hermann in Houston and Cleveland Clinic. Foreign transplants are concentrated among a handful of these hospitals. Many others, like Tulane, Emory in Atlanta, or Mount Sinai in New York, make the decision to perform none. Ochsner declined our request for an on-camera interview. The hospital did send us a lengthy statement noting its program is nationally recognized, and Ochsner's transplant results have consistently ranked among the top 2% in the nation. Ochsner says it's been aggressive in using underutilized organs that has allowed the hospital to save more lives. Ochsner told us UNOS does not have any restrictions preventing transplant for international patients, which is true. But UNOS does have the authority to question these centers about the number of foreign transplant surgeries, but hasn't done so. UNOS says these are decisions left up to transplant centers.
We do not address issues that are non-medical in nature. If we addressed citizenship or residency as a particular reason for whether to accept a patient or not, then that would open up the door to lots of other non-medical criteria, religion, race, political preference.
Congress passed laws governing the transplant program more than 30 years ago when the country had a liver surplus. This practice is legal as long as these non-U.S. citizens wait their turn, just like U.S. patients.
Doctors are doctors. They're not priests or rabbis or ministers. You don't want to set up a system where someone, including but not limited to physicians, can play God.
Louisiana Senator John Kennedy says he's hesitant to change the law, but says as long as we have a shortage of livers, tough decisions need to be made.
And I think as a general rule, you've got to take care of Americans first as long as you have more demand than supply. That doesn't mean that there aren't exceptions.
Even many critics of transplants going to non-U.S. citizens credit Ochsner's program and, medically speaking, say Ochsner makes good use of the livers it receives. The solution to all of this is for more people to sign up as organ donors.
It angers me.
Until that happens, people like Teresa Greenlee Jeffers will continue to wonder if rich non-U.S. citizens ready to pay cash get an unfair advantage.
To say that we're going to let somebody from a foreign country come in and pay money, I'm just not okay with that. These are people's lives. And each of these people is the son, brother, sister, mother, father of somebody. And And if we're not going to take care of our own people first, then what are we doing? It just is not okay.